So now when the storm gets strong enough, what's the threshold for hurricane classification? The wind speed? Is it a wind speed or an air pressure measure?
No, it's wind speed. You reach hurricane classification when you reach wind speeds of 74 miles per hour. And then within the hurricane bracket, which is quite wide, it is subdivided in the Saffir-Simpson scale, which is purely these days a wind scale and not a storm surge scale.
I was looking at the wiki page on the Saffir-Simpson scale, and I was reading from category 1 to category 5 in sequence, and it was like Dante's descent into hell. First one, some tiles will blow off your roof. That's it. Some trees will bend a little, some flooding. Okay. Then in number 2, all roofs are gone. All leaves are stripped off of trees. That keep going up. Bark gets stripped off of trees. And category 5, there's no trees left. And I said, oh my gosh.
Right.
If anyone had to describe a descent into hell, it's the Saffir-Simpson scale, going from 1 to 5. I noticed from the hurricane maps that Hurricane Milton was birthed in the Gulf of Mexico. And I hadn't typically, my stereotype of a hurricane is one that forms, halfway across the Atlantic and migrates towards the Caribbean and either goes up the coast or crosses over. So how often do you get a hurricane forming in the Gulf of Mexico?
You mentioned Milton, and there are some unique aspects, or at least unique in the last 150 plus years with...
Oh, okay. Yeah. So unique in modern civilization. Yes. Okay.
Correct. Always important to state that caveat. But you have to go back to the mid-19th century to find a hurricane that formed in the far western Gulf of Mexico and traversed west to east nearly. I know at the end Milton has made a turn to the northeast, but traversing west to east, that is highly unusual. And the reason it's memorable from the 19th century is because these systems that hit the Florida coast in perpendicular fashion, in other words, the west coast of Florida kind of sort of oriented north-south, the hurricane kind of sort of going straight west to east. It hits the coast perpendicular and it causes a greater storm surge. Storm surge is dependent on many factors, including the angle of approach of the hurricane to the coast.
So is it the new normal that we would be getting hurricanes that are rare, possibly unique in their formation and in their devastation?
Listen, we're already seeing that. Some of the storms that were concurrent with Milton, Leslie, and Kirk, each one of them set records for being the strongest hurricanes ever recorded so far east in the Atlantic, so late in the season. That's a mouthful, but
yes,
okay,
yes.
Right. So an October hurricane way out there in the Atlantic, closer to Africa than the United States. Okay, becoming a hurricane that had not been seen again in modern records, which date back to 1851. But by the way, by pressure, Milton is now the 5th strongest hurricane ever recorded in the Atlantic basin.
So John, you're a meteorologist and you report this on television and people want advice from you. They see a hurricane is coming, our models are good, we know when it's going to landfall. What do you tell people to do?
Well, in a nutshell, you run from the water and you hide from the wind. You must run from the water. Why? Because if you're going to get a storm surge that is 8, 10, 12, 15, 20 feet high, that becomes unsurvivable. You can't swim in that. Or if you're trapped in your house, you get trapped in the attic and you drown. So you run from the water.